This is tough. It's a very sad story. I mean, it's bittersweet, but it just shows you how bad the corruption is. Okay, it's just corruption. It's not even the fact of it's just evil, and it doesn't matter the color of skin. It's corrupt people behind the police badge, whom they swore an oath to protect and serve. Instead, they use that badge to destroy lives. And whether they were black, they used it to shake down blacks, or they were white, they used it to oppress black people who were innocent. Let's get into the story. It really is sad. All charges dismissed against 15 black men who were framed by Chicago police. Chicago, Illinois, the Cook County State's Attorney in Illinois has dropped all charges against 15 men who combined had 18 convictions. All of them were convicted in 2003 to 2008 for drug crimes that they say that local police framed them for. The men, all African American, alleged that former police sergeant Ronald Watts and his team of officers planted the drugs on them and then falsified police reports. Leonard Gibson, one of the men exonerated, told reporters that Watts threatened them if they didn't pay him a so-called protection tax. Gibson comments, "If you're not going to pay Watts, you are going to jail." And Gibson did serve 2 years in jail. He says when he was released from prison, Watts tried to put another case on him. Joshua Tempfer of the Exoneration Project at the University of Chicago says that the officers targeted low-income black men who live in South Side housing projects. He even said that others in command at the Chicago Police Department knew what was going on but did nothing to stop it. The corruption was covered up by the highest levels of the Chicago Police Department. Tempfer said it swept under the rug. Meanwhile, the 15 men and Tempfer all feel that justice had not been fully served. Sergeant Watts and another officer were convicted and served less than 3 years and are now free. Even worse, as many as 7 other officers were never even charged and are still working on the force. Let me play the video.
It may be a first in Chicago. 15 men exonerated of their crimes on the same day. Their felony drug convictions tossed 4 years after a corrupt officer's investigations were first called into question.
These cases, we concluded that unfortunately the police were not being truthful, and we couldn't have confidence in the integrity of their reports and their testimony. And so in good conscience, we could not see these convictions stand.
Leonard Gibson says Officer Ronald Watts framed him and took years away from his life.
I went to jail and did 2 years, 24 months for Watts. I came back home and put another case on him.
In 2013, Watts, then a Chicago police sergeant, was sentenced to 22 months in prison after pleading guilty to theft of government funds. An FBI-led investigation showed Watts and another officer stole money from a federal drug informant. The conviction has led to a review of hundreds of cases. Gibson, like many other men...
And this was a black man who put another black man in jail on false pretenses. Evil.
Whose cases were exonerated, says Watts planted evidence on him.
If you're not going to pay Watts, you're going to jail.
CNN was unable to reach Watts for comment.
It is a prime example of the phrases that we hear, the thin blue line, the code of silence. I've been doing this work for close to 15 years. There is no case, no situation that I have ever seen that comes close to exemplifying the code of silence than this one.
Ben and Clarissa Baker spent 10 years apart as Ben sat in prison.
It's torture, like, because you think in your head every day, like, how did this happen?
Both faced drug charges connected to the rogue officer. At the time, no one would hear their cries of innocence.
No one would listen.
No.
What would they tell you?
There's nothing we can do. You need to call your alderman. Did that. Wrote the alderman. Talked to the FBI.
Help arrived in 2015. The lawyers with the Exoneration Project took on Ben's case and helped overturn his conviction.
Now I finally really feel vindicated.
The Chicago Police Department tells CNN 7 more officers have been placed on administrative duty, while the department's Internal Affairs Unit looks into other cases connected to Sergeant Ronald Watts' team. Ryan Young, CNN Chicago.
This is crazy, man. This is so sickening. Okay. I don't know what goes through a black man's mind who has the badge. You work so hard to get that badge, and you just, instead of being a light to your community, you decide to be a blight to your community. You decide to prey on low-income blacks who are doing nothing wrong. And you try to shake them down, extort them. You have to be a real psycho to do that. And to do that to your own people. Okay. And this is just, it's sickening. It's really sickening. Last time I thought Chicago, Illinois was a liberal state. Oh. And I'm gonna let this one play out. This one was heartbreaking. It really was.
Today allowed their attorney to speak for them.
In all instances, these people are entirely innocent of the crimes that they were charged, and they were forced through the system and forced to plead guilty in many cases because no one would believe what was going on. We all know now it's true. It's really a stain on the city that this was allowed to go on for as long as it has.
In court, Cook County Chief Judge Leroy Martin vacated the convictions and sentences of 12 men. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office requested the cases be thrown out, as they were cases initiated by former Chicago Police Sergeant Ronald Watts. Watts has since been convicted in federal court for planting drugs and lying about evidence to make arrests at the Ida B. Wells complex. Today's cases are among those being reviewed by the state's attorney's Conviction Integrity Unit.
People do not believe that they can trust law.
Kim Fox? Whew. That Jesse Smollett, man, listen.
People tend to deal with their problems within their community without our assistance. And so it's important, just as vigorously as we fight crime in the present, that we right the wrongs of the past.
On the same day as this mass exoneration of 12 men, James Gibson received his certificate of innocence. Gibson served 29 years in prison. He was among the men tortured by former police commander John Burge. Today he shared the toll his wrongful conviction had on his life and the life of his family.
I lost everything. I lost my mother, my father, my brother, my son. Somebody else raised my kids. I can't get none of that back.
The 12 men will be back in court in March to work toward their certificates of innocence. Of course, no certificate will give them back all of that time. By the way, the state's attorney's office integrity unit continuing to review cases. We're told there are 96 other cases waiting to be reviewed involving Watts. By the way, Watts, he was sentenced to 22 months in prison.
still ongoing with those investigations. All right, Leo, thank you.
That it's. I can't even imagine the anger that you know, that Mr. Gibson has. I cannot even imagine the anger. All right. I don't. 10 years. Those who lived at or visited the former Ida B. Wells housing project on Chicago's South Side said former Sergeant Watts was well known as someone to avoid. However, hundreds of people could not avoid Watts in the early 2000s for over a decade. Jermaine Morris said he was one of the people who was wrongfully convicted. He was convicted of heroin possession after Watts shook him down and threatened him, according to Morris. If you don't have no money, you're going to jail, Morris said. Morris was one of the 6 men whose conviction was vacated and charges dropped in court Tuesday morning. Attorney Josh Tepper with the Exoneration Project said that about 100 cases that have been dropped in the last 5 years follow a similar pattern to Morris's case. The team of Watts, his team doing this to Black housing project residents and visitors, and it being covered up for a decade, 10 years, is still being covered up to this day. It's just a tragedy that the city refuses to grapple with, Tepper said. Watts signed police reports for fabricated crimes Morris and others were charged with. Watts was convicted in 2012 and sentenced to 22 months in federal prison. He's doing only 2 years. Only 2 years for something he did over a decade, putting Black men in prison under false pretenses. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox said her office has begun looking at the cases Watts and his unit were involved in since then. I don't even trust her, because just for that Jesse Smollett's fiasco, the institutions let them down, and this is a small step in trying to give them back some of what they've lost, State's Attorney Fox said. Give each and every one of those wrongfully convicted Black men a settlement, a large, hefty settlement. Since 2012, Cook County prosecutors have reversed a total of 100 cases involving former Sergeant Watts. State's Attorney Fox said in a statement, the seeds of distrust for our criminal justice system run deeply in our most impacted by the violence because of people in power like Sergeant Watts and his cronies are targeted and criminally preyed on these communities, leaving these neighborhoods with the communities and saying, I hear you and I see you. Your voices do matter. Little by little, we will continue to work at restoring justice. We will, like we've done, regardless of what zip code someone calls home. The state's attorney's conviction integrity unit reviewed the convictions and determined they were lacked confidence of the initial arrest and validity of the convictions. Morris, who has 2 kids, said he can never get back what Watts took from him. It's been horrific. I lost my job. I had a good job. I lost my job because I couldn't come in because I was incarcerated. Then when I get released, I can't even find a job because of the criminal record, Morris said. According to Exoneration Project, those who were wrongfully convicted in cases related to Watts have served a total of 256 years in prison. They estimate there are still about 100 more cases waiting to be heard. The Exoneration Unit reminds me of the Innocence Project. If you don't know what the Innocence Project is, it's a group of lawyers and people who work with DNA, work to exonerate people who've been wrongfully convicted, and DNA will help free them from the pride of DNA testing. Just with the Central Park 5, okay? It helped with that. This is sad, man. It really is. And you can truly understand the anger of the Black community people who have been wrongfully mistreated by the police. Okay? And it's sad that not only do you have to look out for the racist white cops, you got to look out for psychopathic Black cops who want to see if they could shake down innocent Black people. And he prey on them because they're in low-income households. It's very, very disheartening. He really is. Okay. Truly is. Well, if you like the content, like, share, comment, and